Let's continue learning the method for knitting the front piece. The front piece also divides into the hem, the body, the underarm, and the shoulder parts. The hem is identical to the hem of the back piece. The overall pattern for the rest of the positions is roughly the same as the back piece as well. However, the stitch count and row numbers are slightly different. Additionally, the position of the stockinette stitch is distinct. You need to use the jacquard or intarsia method to knit the corresponding pattern. Since the pattern of color 1 is long and sparse, we can also embroider it on later. If you choose to embroider when knitting, the squares for color 1 should be knitted with the same color in the corresponding position. For example, here you would use the main color yarn. And here you would use color 2. Here you would use color 3. Next, I will explain the method for knitting the pattern. If you need to embroider, please refer to the separate video demonstration. Everyone should first finish knitting the hem and the rows before the body pattern. As you can see, for the small size, this means completing the first 7 rows. The pattern starts from row 8. Here is the chart for the front piece. The grid colors correspond to the yarn colors. First, learn the method for knitting the pattern. Once you have learned it, then, based on your actual situation, refer to the chart to knit. Intarsia knit involves carrying the yarn vertically. Fair all knit involves carrying the yarn horizontally. It's important to note that, when doing fair all or intarsia knit, you need to prepare some small skeins of yarn in advance. This makes knitting more convenient. For example, in the first few rows of the pattern, you need to prepare 2 small skeins of color 1 yarn here, one for knitting this signature section, and the other for knitting this small area. For the main color yarn, in the signature section, you can carry the yarn horizontally. Therefore, you only need 1 small skein of main color yarn. We can use the remaining main color yarn from the previous sections. Simply wind it into a small skein. When you get to this point, you need to prepare another small skein of main color yarn to knit this half section. The main color yarn for this half can be carried horizontally throughout. The specific approach can also be determined based on your preference. Here, I'll teach you how to wind small skeins. There are 2 scenarios. One way is to take yarn from a separate skein to wind it. The other way is to keep the yarn connected to the workpiece. Regardless of which method you choose, the winding technique remains the same. First, leave a tail of about 10 centimeters, or slightly longer if you prefer. This tail will be the one you pull out later. Place it in the position between your left thumb and index finger like this. Pinch it with your thumb, then wind it around your hand like this. If you're winding a small yarn ball while the yarn is still connected to the workpiece, do it like this. Pay attention to keeping this end connected to the workpiece. For easy threading later, make sure to wind with moderate tension. The more stitches in one color block, the larger the yarn ball you'll need to wind. For fewer stitches in a color block, you can wind a smaller yarn ball. If you run out of yarn later, you can join new yarn and continue knitting. After winding to the approximate size you need, leave a tail and cut it off. Then tie a knot like this. You can first wrap a few times round the middle to secure it. If the yarn is smooth, tie a few more knots. If there's a longer tail left here, you can trim it slightly shorter. This is the method for winding a small yarn ball. When using it, just gently pull out the yarn like this. The advantage of winding a small yarn ball is that when knitting, the yarn is relatively fixed, so the ball won't slip off. When you have multiple yarn balls, they are less likely to tangle with each other. It makes knitting more convenient. If you reach the end of a small yarn ball, and it becomes a bit loose, you can take it apart and rewind it. Or if you make a mistake midway through knitting and have to undo a lot of yarn, you can also take that section of yarn and wind it into another small yarn ball. This end is still connected to the workpiece. After winding it, use a piece of yarn to secure it well. That's all you need to do. Next, everyone can wind the small yarn balls as needed for starting your knitting. For this pattern, small size, you start knitting from row 8, which means working it on the wrong side. Follow the chart from left to right. First, use the original main color yarn. Continue knitting normally until you have one stitch left of color 1. In my case, the stitch count is smaller, and I am not working garter stitches on both sides. I will only explain the method. After finishing this part, let me explain how to join yarn, whether on the right side or the wrong side. The method for joining the yarn is the same. Here, I am joining the yarn from the wrong side. Take the new yarn and tie a knot with the original yarn. Pull it tight to secure. This completes the yarn join. If you're joining yarn on the right side, finish the last stitch before the color change. Then tie a knot with the new yarn and the original yarn, and pull it tight to secure. After joining the yarn, refer to the pattern. Knit one stitch with color 1. Then finish with the main color yarn. The yarn tails can be hidden later. Leave color 1 in place. Now, the first row of the signature is complete. The edges of the swatch do not have garter stitch. The focus is on explaining the method for knitting the pattern in the middle. Continue with the second row of the signature, starting by finishing the first stitch position of color 1 with the main color yarn. After completing, bring color 1 up from underneath the main color yarn and knit 1 stitch. This is essentially carrying the yarn vertically, which means bringing the yarn down from the previous row to the current row. Let's take a look at the wrong side. When carrying the yarn vertically, ensure that after knitting 1 stitch, you pause with the yarn that is not being used. It gets secured. This ensures that the texture of the two colors connects tightly, preventing it from being loose and maintaining a neat appearance. Next, leave color 1 as is, and continue knitting the rest of the row with the main color yarn. Then, knit the first stitch of the next row with color 1. Now, I have completed the first stitch of color 1 in the third signature row. Next, bring color 1 up. Pay attention. When carrying the yarn vertically, make sure to cross the 2 threads. Ensure that after completing 1 stitch, the paused yarn is secured underneath. Or below this horizontal line. Continue knitting the rest of the row with the main color yarn. Before you start, take a look at the chart. The first stitch of color 1 in the next row is here, since it's quite a distance from the current ending position. You can carry color 1 to the right for a few stitches. Bring it close to this first stitch. Please watch me demonstrate. After knitting this stitch with color 1, knit 2 stitches with the main color yarn. Then press down on color 1 while knitting the third stitch. This is where it gets pressed. Continue knitting 2 more stitches. And press down on color 1 again while knitting the 3rd stitch. Repeat this process, pressing down 1 more time. That is, press down on color 1 approximately every 3 stitches. This way, color 1 is carried over. At the same time, it gets pressed down a few times. This makes the carried yarn lie flatter. After bringing color 1 close to the starting position of the next row, leave it there. Then finish this row with the main color yarn. And complete the stitches before color 1 in the next row. Now I have already finished knitting. Then alternate between color 1 and the main color yarn. Since each stitch count is less than or equal to 3 stitches, you can simply knit as you would normally when switching colors. That is, knit 1 stitch with color 1, 3 stitches with the main color, 1 stitch with color 1, 2 stitches with the main color, and then 3 stitches with color 1 again. Then leave color 1. Continue knitting with the main color until 1 stitch before the next color 1. Here, add a small ball of yarn for color 1. After knitting 1 stitch, leave color 1. Continue to finish this row with the main color. Bring up color 1 to knit 1 stitch. Pay attention, this is vertical threading. Let me emphasize again, regardless of the right or wrong side. When doing vertical threading, press the yarn down. Then knit 3 stitches with the main color. Here, you perform horizontal threading. When horizontal threading is 3 stitches or fewer, simply switch colors and continue knitting. Continue with color 1 for 1 stitch. Pay attention, after switching colors and knitting 1 stitch, gently stretch the fabric. Ensure the carried yarn is not too tight. This will cause the fabric to shrink slightly. Knit 2 stitches with the main color. Knit 3 stitches with color 1. After completing this, leave color 1 in place. Continue knitting with the main color until 1 stitch before the next color 1. After completing this, join a small skein of color 1 for the yarn. Knit 1 stitch. Continue knitting the rest of the row with the main color. Since color 1 starts here on the next row, and there are a few stitches apart from the current ending position. When the interval exceeds 3 stitches, we can bring the yarn forward in advance. This makes it convenient for knitting here on the next row. Here, we can bring the yarn forward once midway. After bringing color 1 forward, pause color 1, and continue to finish knitting this row, then finish the stitches before color 1 on the next row. Now I have finished knitting. We have reached this point. When knitting 10 stitches with color 1, we can bring the main color yarn over, then continue knitting the following stitches with the main color yarn. For this section here, you can also bring the yarn horizontally. This segment has more stitches. So when bringing the yarn horizontally, if the number of stitches is more than 3, you should press the yarn down every 3 stitches. After finishing knitting with color 1 here, pause. For this section, switch colors and knit as usual. Finish knitting this row. Let's knit the row we just explained. We will finish these 10 stitches with color 1. When pressing the yarn down on the wrong side while bringing it horizontally, do it the same way as on the right side. After finishing knitting with color 1 here, pause. Continue knitting with the main color. When you reach the position for switching colors, switch colors and knit as usual. At the end, you can bring color 1 back a few stitches, making it more convenient for knitting the next row. Now we have completed this row of the sample. Let me summarize the key points for knitting this pattern. When bringing the yarn vertically, make sure to cross the 2 threads each time. Ensure that the paused yarn is pressed underneath. And each time you finish a color, make sure to check ahead where the next starting position for that color will be. Determine if you need to bring the yarn in advance. Bring it to a nearby position before pausing, or add a new small yarn ball. For example, in the 3rd row of the signature. After finishing color 1, bring it a few stitches to this position. This makes it convenient for knitting the 4th row. It avoids having the carried yarn too long, which can be loose. Here, we added another small yarn ball of color 1. For horizontal yarn carrying, if the number of stitches skipped is less than or equal to 3, just switch colors and continue knitting normally. If more than 3 stitches, carry the yarn every 3 stitches or so. The method here is the same. After each color change, after completing the first stitch, stretch the fabric piece. Make sure not to tighten the carried yarn, otherwise, the fabric piece will shrink. You can notice that horizontal and vertical yarn carrying are used in combination. It depends on the chart instructions and your own preference. Additionally, when weaving in ends, yarn tails at the pattern position should be woven in on the wrong side of the boundary between 2 colors. Ensuring it does not affect the texture on the right side. You can also weave in the entire tail. Next, follow the chart instructions for knitting. After completing the last row of the shoulders on each side, join the loops with the back piece's loops and bind off. For example, if this side is the actual left side when worn, it should be attached to the left side of the back piece. If this side is the actual right side, when worn, it should be attached to the right side of the back piece. Please watch the demonstration of the method for joining and binding off. Both fabric pieces are in a loop state. We will consider the stockinette stitch side. as the right side. Joining and binding off is usually done on the wrong side of the fabric, which means you need to place the two pieces with their right sides facing each other. Typically, one of the fabric pieces remains unbroken. This yarn can be from either piece. Place the side with the yarn tail on the right. When joining and binding off, you usually bind off while knitting the both sides together. This means passing through loops of both fabric pieces at the same time. You knit stitches and bind off as you go. Just work into each stitch in sequence and bind off. If one piece has more stitches, you need to decrease while binding off on the side with more stitches. Suppose this piece has more stitches. You can pass through 2 loops at once. Then insert through one more loop, knit the stitch and bind off. If the back piece has more stitches, pass through 2 loops at once on the back. Knit the stitch and bind off. In my case, both pieces have the same number of stitches, so I will continue binding them off. Tie off the yarn tail and hide it. This is what it looks like after joining and binding off. Up to this point, that concludes the front piece. After completing both the front and back pieces, sew the body sides together. This can also be done according to your preference. Essentially, this involves sewing row to row. Please refer to the demonstration of the sewing method. Next, let's learn how to connect rows. We usually use an invisible seam method for this. When sewing, pick up the horizontal strands along the edges. Let's start by getting to know the fabric piece. First, locate the first stitch on the edge. The first stitch on the edge typically has 4 possible situations. The first is a slip stitch. This means picking up along the texture without knitting, forming a large braid. The second type is also a slip stitch. But when making the slip stitch, it goes against the texture underneath, forming a knot like this. The third type is knitting every row. Usually, you knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side, forming small braids like this. The fourth type is also knitting every row, but you knit on both the right and wrong sides, creating a waffle stitch. The second stitch is right next to the first stitch on its left side. For example, in this fabric piece, when viewed from this side, the second stitch shows a knit texture. From the other side, the second stitch shows a purl texture. Whether the second stitch is a knit texture or a purl texture, you can observe that the loops are all oriented forward. The loops that are oriented backward have horizontal bars below them, which is the horizontal strand between the two stitches. The same applies to this side. This is a backward-oriented loop. This line is the horizontal strand between the two stitches. The edge worked in the washboard stitch follows the same principle. This is the second stitch. This column here is also the second stitch, forward-oriented loops. Between these two stitches, there is a backward-oriented loop. This line here is the horizontal strand between the two stitches. The edge is worked with slip stitches. Similarly, between these two stitches, there are also horizontal strands. Regardless of the type, each strand roughly corresponds to a row. Before sewing, you can weave in the yarn tails on the wrong side first and tie a knot to secure it. Here, I won't hide the yarn tail. For seamless sewing, alternate between these two fabric pieces each time, picking up the horizontal strands along the edges of the two stitches. For sewing, pick up 1-2 strands each time. Note, if the row counts of the two pieces match, you can sew them together correspondingly. This means the number of strands picked up each time will be the same. Always insert the needle where you last pulled out. To pick up the horizontal strand, here, I pick up 1 strand each time. After sewing a few stitches, slightly tighten the yarn. If the row counts of the two pieces differ, but you need to sew them together evenly, you can pick up more strands from the side with more rows as needed. For example, generally, you pick up one strand each time. On the side with more rows, you can, at appropriate positions, pick up two strands. Here, the row counts of the two pieces are the same, so I will continue sewing to finish. This is the method for seamless sewing for rows. After the body is sewn up, pick up stitches around the neckline to work the collar. Refer to the chart for the number of stitches to pick up. Refer to the video demonstration for the method of picking up stitches in the first round. Start by picking up and knitting the first round. I will demonstrate using this small sample. We begin picking up stitches from the back piece. You will notice that the back piece is usually divided into three sections, two sides and the middle part. Before picking up stitches, you can first check the requirements on the chart. Distribute the total number of stitches to be picked up on the back piece across these three sections. Typically, the middle part is picked up stitch by stitch, 1 for 1. The remaining stitches should be evenly divided between the two sides. For example, if I need to pick up a total of 21 stitches on the back piece, I would pick up 11 stitches in the middle, 1 for 1. These 11 stitches usually correspond to the stitches where the middle was bound off. The remaining stitches can be evenly picked up as 5 stitches on each side. This is how you handle the round of picking up stitches. Knit all stitches as knit stitches. For these kinds of edges, you just pick up a few strands along the edge. Make sure to keep them roughly even. Here, I'm using different colors of yarn for the demonstration to make it easier to watch. After picking up the side stitches, pick up 11 stitches in the middle, 1 for 1. Once this is done, for this edge, continue to pick up 5 stitches evenly. Once this is done, When you reach the front piece position, distribute the total number of picked up stitches for the front piece equally across these 3 sections. For example, if I need to pick up a total of 39 stitches on this front piece, and I decreased 7 stitches in the middle, then I pick up 16 stitches on each side. Just make sure to distribute them roughly evenly. After picking up all the stitches, check the number of stitches, then distribute them evenly across 3 straight needles. This completes the first round of picking up stitches. After completing the first round, refer to the pattern instructions. For the second round, you need to decrease stitches. That means decreasing 4 stitches evenly on the back piece, and decreasing 1 stitch on each side of the front piece. You can start by using stitch markers. Roughly mark the positions for decreasing stitches. The specific number of stitches to decrease can also be adjusted according to your needs. After marking the positions, you can start knitting. For the second round, you will mainly knit purl stitches. At the decrease positions, use the method of purling 2 stitches together, left slant decrease. Please watch the demonstration of this stitch technique. Purl 2 stitches together, left slant decrease. This is also known as a P2 tog. When knitting, insert the right needle from right to left through 2 loops on the left needle. Knit 1 purl stitch. The P2 tog is now complete. You can see that the loop on the left side is on top. Let me demonstrate this again. Insert the right needle through 2 loops on the left needle. Knit 1 purl stitch. This is the method for the P2 tog. Starting from the third round, you will work even, alternate between a round of knit stitches and a round of purl stitches. This creates the rib stitch pattern. Refer to the chart instructions and finish knitting the collar. After completing it, you need to bind off. Please watch the demonstration of the binding off method. I'll demonstrate the Icelandic bind off using this small swatch. This method is typically well suited for binding off stockinette stitches. First, knit 1 stitch. Then, transfer this loop to the left needle, moving it from right to left. Next, insert from right to left through the first loop, and then from left to right through the second loop. Knit 1 stitch. Release these 2 loops. This completes the binding off of 1 stitch. Continue to transfer the loops from the right needle to the left needle. Then pick up the second loop from the inside. Knit a stitch. This binds off another stitch. Repeat this process to continue binding off stitches. Until only one loop remains. Leave a tail about 15 centimeters before cutting the yarn. Gently pull to tighten. Weave the tail in along the texture on the wrong side. Then sew a few stitches to connect both ends. Ensure there are no noticeable notches. Finally, hide the tail. You can also weave in the entire tail. This is the method for the Icelandic bind-off. Up to this point, we have finished explaining this vest. If you have any unclear points during the knitting process, don't hesitate to join our Facebook group to get supports. Susan's family. Support your handwork experience. Enjoy the joy of life. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next episode.